everyone, this is Harmony, and today I'm going to work on some HDR'd portraits. Now, maybe you're thinking, HDR and portraits, that's kind of a weird combo, but I did an experiment with this last fall actually with my wedding shots taken by the awesome Lauren Zurchin, and I actually got some really awesome results. So I'm going to be recreating that today, and I've picked out 3 images. So usually we don't really do HDR with portraits most of the time, and I would say in most cases that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a sensory overload, and when you're trying to focus an image on a person, sometimes it takes away from that image. But with these images, we've got a beach setting, so it's kind of a plain background. There's not a lot going on, and the cool thing about this image is there's a great sunset in the background. And I really wanted to preserve all those colors because I just thought it would make the images feel a lot more whimsical. And these, yes, this is actually Sean and I for our wedding day portraits. And the other thing about this image is that obviously we're a lot more backlit and a little bit silhouetted. So we can really get a lot out of these by boosting the lighting on ourselves. So I am in camera raw right now. My images naturally open that way because these files from Lauren are raw files. If you are working with JPEGs and starting out with JPEGs, you might have a little bit of trouble tweaking the colors, but you should be able to get away with quite a bit anyways. And how you're going to do that is you're going to go up to your menus right here. When your files open in Photoshop, click on Filter. There'll be a drop-down menu right here, and there will be Camera Raw Filter somewhere around here. You'll click on that with your image and you should get all of these same settings right here. So here we are. I'm going to go ahead and work with our first image. One thing I want to first tweak and work with is the exposure. Now granted, it looks like I don't want to tweak the exposure too much, as you can see, because when I do, we're starting to lose these colors up in the sky. So we might tweak this a little bit as we go, but the problem with exposure is it brings everything up at once and makes you kind of lose some of those background colors you might like. So what I am actually going to do first is go down here to highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So what we can do with that is we can start by maybe moving our shadows. As we move our shadows, you can see we actually start to brighten up this image quite a bit. And it might seem kind of crazy right now, but we can kind of readjust these settings later on. So by bringing this up, you'll notice that we're bringing up the darks in the image and the silhouetted zone, but not necessarily reducing anything in the background. So we're keeping our sunset colors. Now I might move some highlights around a little bit. We'll see what we can get. I can actually tweak those down to kind of really hone in on those really gorgeous sunset colors she captured. And then with our whites, if we move our whites up, we're actually getting a slight contrasting effect, which means it's kind of heightening the color in our background. Now, we are also getting a little bit more of this blown out section right here, but to be honest, I think that's kind of okay. At least for my image. You can make that choice with yours. And then down here with the blacks, what we could do is we could actually move our blacks down just a touch, or even up. Let's see. I'm going to move them down just a touch, just to get a little bit more contrast in there. And then up here, we can actually add a little bit of contrast. And at this point, maybe just a tiny tweak of extra exposure. Like I said, we'll probably adjust that as we go and just see how things are moving. So that did quite a bit. And I'll try and bring these files back up, the other ones later on, so you can kind of see the differences between them. But, I mean, if you look at something like this to something like this, there's quite a difference. I really like how it's working out in these images because, again, we have a decently plain background, but a pretty one. We've got this nice sunset, the beach, and so it just seemed like it would work out all right to go ahead and expose these things closer together without taking the focus away from the models. As far as color tweaking go, let's see, I might warm my image up just a touch. Kind of like how that's working. Probably keep saturation and vibrance right around where they are, and I might make adjustments to that later. So we go to our second image, and I'm going to do something very similar. We're going to adjust up our shadows quite a bit to bring in the lighting on our subjects. With this one, I'm actually not going to do too much on the highlights. We actually have quite a bit of contrast going on here, so I don't actually have to do too much, I think, with the blacks either. And I'm going to go ahead and leave our exposure mostly alone. And we might adjust it later. Cool. So there's that one. And our last one. Let's go ahead and boost our shadows. Maybe get some more contrast going on in there. So there we are. So that's kind of a basic starting HDRing with just camera raw. And I'm going to try and use a couple other tools once we open these up in Photoshop to try and further adjust these lightings and colors. So we're going to go ahead and shift click on all of these images. Make sure you do that before you click open. Then open your images. So here we go. We now have our images opened up here in Photoshop. Let's go back to our first one. Now I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments, and then go down to Shadows and Highlights. Now my shadows and highlights are completely opened, but if you've never used this tool before, it probably looks like this right now. You're just going to go ahead and click this little button right there, and it is going to open up all these options. Now you also should notice the second that you did that, it probably made your image look a little crazy because it automatically puts a bunch of adjustments onto your image and makes those adjustments right away. So there's ways to adjust those, and in fact if you take this amount tool right at the top and you slide that all the way down, your image will be pretty much back where it was. But we're going to go ahead and pop it back to where it was just for the moment, and I'm going to start with this radius tool down here. And I like to slide mine over this way usually when working with portraits because it kind of takes out some of the crazy brightness in the image. And I might tweak how much tone I have in there. I'm going to leave it about there. Then I'm going to start knocking off the amount until I'm happy. And for highlights, I don't think I'm going to do anything more. I'm quite happy with how much background color we got here in Camera Raw. But if you do want more of your lights pulled down, this is a good tool to use for that. You're obviously probably going to want to mask out your characters after that just to make sure that it's not affecting them too much. And I'm going to actually add a little mid-tone at the bottom here. Now this can start to look pretty extreme, so it's totally up to you how much of that you want to add into your image. But I'm really liking kind of the crazy, wild, contrasted look for this. So this is how it started before we put it in here. This is where we are now. It really adds in the texture details again after pulling it out of Camera Raw with all of the brights and dark adjustments. So click OK, and I'm going to move to my next image. I'm not even sure I'm going to do all that much with this one in shadows and highlights because it's already quite contrasty. I might brighten it a bit. Yeah, as far as this stuff goes, that's going to make it crazy. Maybe just add just the tiniest amount. Click OK for that one. Actually, I am going to go back in one more time with that one. I'm just curious to see what the highlights will do to it. Oh, let's get rid of all that extra. So yeah, it's going to orange it out kind of a lot. That's not too bad though. If we add a little bit more brightness in there, just a tiny hint of that. I'm not sure which I like better. They're both special. Alright, I'll go for this. Okay, so that's that image. On to our next one. And we'll go to Shadows and Highlights. gonna add a bunch of brightness into this one, really bring up the lighting on us. And then I'm probably going to do some mid-tones. There we go. That's looking a bit brighter, but it's holding on to the contrast we like. Not going too overboard. There we go. So there's that one. And now what we're kind of down to is some color tweaking and maybe a little bit of brightness tweaking for these images. And to do the brightness tweaking, I'm not sure if this is going to work. This is a bit of an experiment, guys. Let's go ahead and try curves. So I'm going to take my curves. So that's kind of what I'm pulling for this one. Just a slight bell. I mean, you'll have to experiment a little bit to see what's working best for your image, obviously. But what I'm liking about this is it's like kind of just, let's see, yeah, it's just lightening up this area a little more without taking too much from the rest of the area. And I might even just downgrade that a little bit. There we go. I'm happy with that. Obviously, it is all about what you like most for your image, if you want to go for a more subtle version of this or a more intense one. So that will be that one for the curves layer. Again, with this image, I love the amount of contrast it naturally had in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave this alone, I think, until we get to the color. So no curves for that. And I do like the softness of this one, so I might leave that alone, but let's just go ahead and mess around and see what we get anyways. So again, just trying to be really subtle with the changes. Don't want to take too much from it. You know what? I do believe I'm going to leave this one alone. Another option is I could have taken the curves layer mask right here and used my black paintbrush tool to erase the background from it, and what that would have done is bring back all the colors. But I like the original one more, I think, than messing with it in curves. So I'm going to delete that, and now what we're going to do is mess with our colors. And to do that, I think I'm going to go ahead and use color balance. So in color balance, we have our midtones, and then we have our shadows and our highlights. Obviously those affect the area they are named after. So I'm just going to mess with our midtones. So I didn't make very many changes here, as you can see, just kind of a little bit of yellows, just trying to kind of tweak in the color range I want. I want this one to feel warm, but not too warm. I'm going to go to actually my shadows, I think, next. So now I'm going to be affecting the dark zones of the image, and I'm wondering if that'll just bring it a little bit more down to earth with the color range. Just kind of trying to get this like rusty brown color for my darks, and I'm doing that by kind of pulling out a tiny bit of the yellow, adding a bit of magenta to kind of downtone that brown color, and I think I'm pretty happy with it there. And for highlights, that'll probably be affecting mostly this zone, and it's actually going to brighten the image up a little bit, so you have to be careful with the highlights. If I add yellow, yeah, you can see it just kind of starting to blow out. But I can add some reds, and that's kind of interesting. As you can see, if I bring that in quite a bit, you can see it's kind of affecting the mid-zone of the image. So if I remove this, we can see it went from there to there, and I'm quite happy with that. So I'm pretty happy with that image now. If I did anything else, I might add a vignette to it, but to be honest, I can kind of see a nice little bit of vignette to it, and that makes it quite nice on its own, coming out right out from the raw image. I don't think I really have to do anything else to this image. I'm quite happy with it. If I did do anything else, I might brighten my face up a little bit, but I kind of like having just a tiny bit of that silhouetted feel still happening. With this one, we'll go ahead and use brightness and contrast again, or sorry, color balance. Sorry. I think I'm going to go to the highlights for this one first. Because we have so much sky going on here, I want to see what will happen with it. So we can make it redder, but I'm kind of straying away from that with this one. Kind of like adding a little bit more yellow in there, and maybe magenta. Balance those together. That's kind of fun. So right now we're going from this to this, so just getting a little bit more of those reds and warm yellows in there. And I think for the rest of this one I'm just going to go to shadows. I thought the mid-tone colors were quite balanced for what I wanted in this image. Yeah, I might add a bit of blue to them. I think I'm going to stay away from the magentas in this one and just add to the blues and maybe a bit of reds. It's kind of nice. Alright, so this is a pretty subtle change. In fact, you might not be able to see it from the video, but I just added a bit of blues and reds to just kind of add a bit of darkness to these shadow colors right in here. And then other than that, I think I'm pretty happy with this one. I might go to the mid-tones just to see what happens. If I add more yellow, I think I'll add just a bit more yellow to it. So we started here, and now we're here for this one, and I think that one's pretty nice now. So here's our last image, and again, I think we'll go in with a color balance, highlights, add a bit of warmth to it, shadows. I'm going to add a little more magenta to that. And I think I'll leave it right there. And done. And the last thing I think I'm going to do is just check and see if it might be interesting to add a tiny bit more contrast to some of these. So we'll go down here, start with this one again. Oh, I'd say that is perfect with contrast. I don't want to mess with that any further. This one's pretty good too. In fact, this one might be the only one I do that with. So I'm going to add a brightness and contrast layer. That's opened up now. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and just move the contrast in a little further. And I would say right about there is good. And what that's doing is it's kind of sharpening the contrast between the skin and hair and textures, and it's also warming up this yellow a little more, and I'm liking that. Alright, so I would say those are my 3 finished images. I'll show you some before and afters right here. As you can see, going from a silhouetted, really kind of dark but it has nice colors in the background. If you have a good quality camera, you can take those silhouetted images and then just kind of flush them with color and textures and give them more of an HDR look. Now again, this works best if you have a decently plain background because you don't want to pull the attention away from your models or your subjects. But if you do, then this makes for a really fun technique and a very unique look. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching Temperate Sage tutorials, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos in the future.